Hello and welcome to Tuesday, February 15th, 2022's EDIC meeting conducted once again remotely per governor's order. For the foreseeable future, these will be virtual. I imagine that in 2022 we will have an in-person meeting, but it might not be till December. I don't know. There are no guarantees. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. So we have 3 minutes documents to approve. They're from November. They're from January. They're from early February. Who would like to move that we get going on those? I mean, we could decide to do them as a package unless you've got conversation to have.
I can't vote on November because I wasn't there. I have to abstain.
Great, so let's not do it as a package. Who'd like to move that we vote on November?
I make a motion.
And I'll second it.
Great. Everybody first, everybody seconds, really good. Any further discussion to approve November 2021 meeting minutes? Okay, all in favor of approving November 2021's meeting minutes, holler aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Abstain here. It's out.
Yep, very good. So we've approved those with 2 abstentions. Now, January 2022. Did we have everybody at that and at February's, early February's?
I was not in early February.
Okay, so we will do those separately as well. I'd like to hear a motion.
Motion we approve January 18th minutes.
Wonderful. You got a second? Great.
I'll second.
I would like to request a change to the minutes for the January minutes.
Okay.
In the planning department update, in the last sentence of the last blurb there, it says, also cited that the issue of traffic generated is unfounded, blah, blah, blah. It should say Paul cited that the issue. But it just says also cited.
Okay.
Okay, any further discussion about the January 18th, 2022 meeting minutes? Okay, so then my proposal would be that we are then voting to approve the draft that Josh shared with the edit of all cited traffic, etc. Okay, so all in favor of that change and then otherwise passing these minutes? Okay, holler aye. Very good.
Aye.
Those pass. Thank you, Josh. Special February meeting minutes. Have we got a motion?
I propose we approve February 1st minutes.
Second.
Lovely. Any further discussion of the February 1st? Yeah, meeting minutes. Nope. Okay, all in favor of approving February 1st, 2022 meeting minutes, holler aye.
Aye.
Very good. One
Abstain.
abstention from Cassie. Yep. Okay. Whew. We can really inundate people with emails about minutes from EDIC now. That's cool. Guys, I signed up. I've already said this. I signed up for way too many committee notices. I'm inundated every day. Just emails about minutes posted, agendas posted. It's too much information. I got to go unsubscribe. I got to go decide my priorities. I know too much. Okay, we haven't got a member of the public here. Does anybody want to take this time to say they want to add something to our agenda today explicitly?
I have a question. Has anybody heard what the ordinance committee said about the vacant windows at their meeting? They don't post their minutes.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Do we know when their next meeting is?
I mean, I could look it up. Or I could just reach out to the chair and see that way what happened.
True. Okay, do you want to do that?
Sure.
Great.
Gwen.
I think we're going to postpone updates from the planning department. I will say that the EDIC agrees, quote unquote newsletter, for lack of a better term, went out via the like city news blasts, and they are now working on getting it posted to city Facebook. I didn't know that any of that was happening, so I didn't give you any heads up. I just learned about it yesterday when it appeared in my inbox. So my understanding from Jeff is that we can have a discussion about what that process actually looks like moving forward, because there was a large amount of confusion about that, most of which I wasn't privy to. That said, we have Jeff's early thinking is that in the future, we should consider adding images to what we write up. Okay, fine, we can think about how to do that. And also, aren't you glad we're not committing ourselves to doing this regularly? Okay, so I included on here that we would continue discussing or planning our 2022 actions or goals, including the local rapid recovery report. I asked you all to read this for I think the January meeting. Here's the Easthampton Planning Department now. So I am interested in having a conversation about some of the findings in there and some of the suggestions in there. Yeah, so that said though, Jeff Bagg, do you want to just like launch into planning department stuff with absolutely no ado? Because we were about to move on to our other one item.
I'll try that. Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I did let Gwen know that I was gonna be late. I didn't prepare much for an update. I'm happy to answer your questions, but I think you had the LRP plan on your agenda. And I think, maybe not an immediate step, but I think if you guys were already talking about kind of things to look at with that, I did want to, I guess, use that to say, I think we're considering a project that would come out of the LRP plan, which is to look at access and infrastructure around getting from Pleasant Street to the back of the mills. So that was kind of articulated in that LRP plan a little bit, and kind of a vision for the mills, like a new vision for the mill district. Last one that we have is from, am I breaking up or am I okay?
A little bit.
Last
Some
one.
kind of feedback or something.
I'm gonna mute Josh
Some kind of feedback.
and Chris.
Sorry, I was definitely hearing the reverberation. The idea of a new vision for the mill district. So we have one from 2002, and there have been so many things identified in that plan that have been accomplished that we're at this point where at some point in the next couple of years we should look at the whole mill district again and find out what do we need for the next 10 years in terms of the vision. Things like the pedestrian bridge over the pond continues to come up. It's kind of one of those lofty goals, but the type of thing that if we have that in a plan and it's part of the vision, if there ever is a funding source that could do that, we would want to be able to show that it was in a plan. Pedestrian access and just continuing to promote that connection between the downtown and the mills. And then if you've obviously been behind the mills, the two entrance, actually there's three, the three entrances to get you behind the mills were not upgraded as part of the other work to build all that parking. So the mills have thousands of square feet of vacant space still. So there's a lot of room to still develop the mills. And so that's one project that we may kind of pursue. The state revamped their programs for grants and they consolidated it into one place. They called it the One Stop for Growth, and things like MassWorks, which is what funded the parking behind the mills, and it also funded the roundabout and the thing on Ferry Street, the multi-use path. now you have to go into this one stop for growth portal, and when they ask you to put together an expression of interest, and that process is open right now, and then there's a full application due in June. So this idea of doing some community outreach, having some kind of community meeting to help understand a vision for the mills, and then trying to come up with some design plans for infrastructure improvements. That's kind of one big project that we kind of see on the horizon here in the next few months that we might try for, and that's in that plan. So I think, that would be that. I guess that's where I would leave off at this point. I don't know if there's other things in that plan that anyone's seen so far that would be interesting. We're trying with wayfinding still. We ended that kind of project that we had started. It dragged on. That was definitely one project that got impacted by the pandemic, just really slowed it down, and the consultant ran out of their funds. So we kind of capped it off. There is a report, which I think I forwarded out. I think Gwen, we forwarded it out to the group. So at some point we should lift that one back up to resurrect the idea of wayfinding and signs for both people arriving in cars and people on foot and bikes and stuff like that. So those are the two projects I see kind of. Actually, there's one more, which is a project in partnership with the chamber, like on an online shopping opportunity, an opportunity to help support businesses be able to sell products online. And I think those are the top three that I think we see kind of churning about. And the magic of those grants is when the right recipe of timing, money, and a little bit of momentum, when they all come together, that's usually how they kind of lift off. So I think with that, I'll stop for now.
Gwen?
Does anybody have, okay, it looks like Tom has some comments or questions.
Yeah, Jeff, as you said, there are currently 3 ways to get behind the mills from Pleasant Street. Is the plan to make all 3 of those viable entrances to the back of the mills?
Good question. It's one that it doesn't have a clear answer. I think one of the things that we have to do as part of a project is bring all the stakeholders together. So there's the city, there's at least 3 mill owners, then there's all the businesses in that little neighborhood. So I think it depends on who you ask, Tom. I don't think there's clarity on what is best yet. So that's the kind of thing it sounds like it'd be easy to just pick one and just go with it. But I think we wanted to bring on a consultant to help us look at, what would be the best option or options to get people in and out. There's definitely pros and cons for each of the 3 intersections, 3 of the 3 driveways, but that's kind of the core of one of the projects, is to figure that out.
And in the meantime, what about the possibility of any signage that lets folks know that's the way to get back there? Because unless you're from here, you're not really sure how to get back there.
Yeah. Yep. I think those are all part of what we kind of need to launch into to get everyone's input, and come up with a plan that is going to serve kind of the best interest of everybody. Because I don't think everyone's interest is exactly the same. So, but yeah, it also sounds easy to just put some kind of sign. We had some ideas about just putting up those public parking signs,
Right.
That at a minimum, like, banners are pretty inexpensive. So we could probably do that in the interim, but then from there, it just begs a little bit more of discussion, because then I think like a marquee sign. I think Eastworks has a marquee out front, but a marquee, we need to carefully design that, and we need to make sure we understand who's going to get promoted on the marquee. So that's why we have multiple businesses on one sign and direct people in the back. So those are the kinds of things that we want to get. We want to get some money to have a consultant kind of help us get through that, come up with designs, and the best case scenario is we could get agreement on what is needed or desirable, and then have designs in hand that would make us eligible to then take that final step to get money to build them.
Okay.
But yeah, I think, go ahead.
A month or so ago, maybe longer, I attended a meeting that Jim Whitmer held about his plans for a parking garage on Pleasant Street. Do you know if that has any possible legs at all?
I was not there. Do you want to the extent that you feel comfortable, do you want to describe that meeting,
Sure.
what you heard?
Pretty aggressive, impressive looking structure. It's like a 4-story parking garage that would go on the current Keystone parking lot. Also removing the house that's next to Jerry's Variety. So it would basically come up to Jerry's Variety property and go all the way to the house that's there that has an attorney in that house. And a 4-story, it's as tall as the mills. And a parking garage, which basically takes a lot of the cars off the street and provides additional parking. Very, very impressive looking building. I think it's something EDIC might support. There was only 2 abutters that showed up that had some questions that didn't seem overwhelming, but I'm just not sure about his capability of pulling it off, or major. I mean, I don't know how many zeros would be after the dollar number that he would need to pull that off.
Yeah. I think I have heard about that. And I think at the same time, I think the owner of Eastworks has embarked on their own vision for the future of the Eastworks property. So there's a lot of buildings, and there's a lot of land. And I think that's kind of why now it's kind of a time to create a vision so that we kind of have a clear understanding of what the community wants or needs in that area. And then there are things that individual mill owners, I think, are finding out that they need too. And we want to do the best we can to kind of at least package it up so there's some kind of cohesiveness to it. So yeah, that that could happen and it could not happen, Tom. It's definitely like one of those things that's unclear. But there's a lot of momentum building out there for kind of setting the stage for the next 10, 20 years out there. So there's some big ideas.
Good.
Jeff, are there in the rapid recovery project, what's the P stand for? Plan? Report, are there elements of that you looked at and thought, EDIC really needs to have fingers in that pie?
I think the 3 that I mentioned, I think this, the idea, so Mo, maybe if time allows, I think Mo could talk about it's Shop Where I Live is it's a program that kind of came. So remember that local rapid recovery is impacts due to the pandemic and steps that we can take to make our business community stronger. That's really kind of like the gist of that whole plan. The Shop Where I Live, the creating some kind of mill district vision, and wayfinding, I think EDIC should be part of all 3 of those. And where we go back to just that One Stop for Growth program is the planning department, myself and the mayor will be putting together that expression of interest. It's kind of like, it's almost like a 1 or 2 page, here's our idea, tell us, make sure it fits your programs. And then we would launch between now and June, we would put together a full blown application. And so I would plan to come to EDIC to explain the scope of the project, and at a minimum at that first stage is get a letter of support. And then we wait and find out if we get funded. Because then it would be next year, it would be a series of community meetings, and that would be definitely where the EDIC would need to be present and promoting business, supporting businesses, and that's that type of thing. Once we get rolling, it's just a long lead for a lot of these projects.
Yeah. Mo, do you have any thoughts to share about that particular program?
It's really pretty basic. It's an opportunity. I shouldn't say just, it's an opportunity for those businesses who do not have the capability to do e-commerce to help them provide that. Helping building resiliency and long-term resiliency for when situations get disrupted again at whatever point. And it helps, there's a lot of feedback about how, Amazon, the whole Amazon thing is it's hard to compete with that. So this is an opportunity. It's a hyper-local opportunity for businesses who don't have that capability still to have that. So it's a matter of funding at this point. So working on that.
Right. And we did put Mo and I put an application in for money for that. And we were supposed to hear back pretty soon. The Mass Office of Business Development, that MOBD. So, that is something that, and Mo and I have talked about this a couple of times because she was kind of the city and the chamber partnering on the LRP plan. And we're actually just on the heels of this variant, right? So that we're just coming out of a big blip. And I think we just ought to be aware that it could certainly happen again. And that e-commerce was something that Mo found a lot of her members were lacking that ability to sell products online. And so when everyone's doing curbside or no touch pickup, and how do you get people to still buy stuff from you, that e-commerce is still really important. So it's kind of building up the framework to let that happen.
The beautiful thing too is the partnership with the city. There's opportunity and a structure so that you don't have to be a chamber member to participate. But that's a detail.
Jeff, Mo, Gwen, I meant to get this to you earlier about a possible agenda item. Unfortunately, it just popped back into my head. And Mo, you might be all over this, but is there something we should be forward thinking, looking about assisting businesses that will be disrupted by the reconstruction on Union Street?
So Jeff and I, and actually the mayor, have had conversations regarding the chamber partnering again to be a communication arm in regards to what's happening and when, and what we need to be on the lookout for. And the chamber being the portion of the partnership that might be able to say, well, if this is happening, if this is going to happen on a particular week and there's no other way that we can work around shutting this down, whatever this is, right? Because, XYZ can't get their deliveries. Is there another way that we can think about this, that sort of thing? And so Jeff and the mayor have been very open to that. So we've been, working on that.
I think that's a great, Tom, thank you, Mo. I think that's really good. And Tom, I think it's a great question. And I think that if this group can put that on an agenda for next time. So your next meeting will be March, right? So everything that we're told is that we are grand hustle to finish all the pieces of that puzzle that we were going through at City Council with Union Street. We're told that we're still on track. So we're basically handing the project over to Mass DOT and they will put it out to bid. And they're telling us that it's going to go out to bid sometime in March. And we don't really know more than that. So then it kind of goes out to bid for probably at least a month, right? When contractors are looking at it and putting together proposals. And so at some point this is the hard part, is everyone keeps telling me don't say dates, but I'm telling you, everyone wants to know dates. So maybe roughly in April, and sometime in April, we should have a contractor selected for the project. And then as soon as we actually have a contractor, that's when they will start to put together a construction schedule, a detour plan. And it doesn't have to be like Union Street's going to get closed, but just where there'll be one lane open and one lane closed, and how they're going to approach the construction. We have to wait until the contractor's on board. So really, like a logistics schedule would probably come out in April or May for if they put shovels in the ground in June or July. So we're going to have kind of only a pretty small window of time, but that's what Mo and I have talked about. I think the EDIC would be really invaluable for this, is to help get the word out. The first, like, we're gonna have an initial plan, and then it's gonna, we're gonna have to update that like basically every week for a year and a half or more. And I see, there's some people on this group that are really good on social media, and I think that is just one activity that we can all play, is to reroute people back to, like, here's the facts, about what's actually going on, because we just need to know that people are going to kind of lose their minds and make stuff up. And I think that's the strategy we have to come up with, is how best can we share information. We talked about doing like a weekly video, like out on Union Street, to kind of show what has been happening or what will be happening. And I'm committed to that, but I do know, having made those videos, it's a lot of work. And then I think the thing I found that the hardest is then you have to do it every week. Like you have to be consistently ready to do something, even if it's not a lot of information. So we have a little bit of a road, and that's a bad pun. We have a little bit of work ahead of us as a community to get information out about that project. Unfortunately, we don't have the information yet. So
I think that along those lines, I'm interested in making sure that we are also thoughtful about making communication accessible and available to residents of that area as well, especially as I know a lot of people have now transitioned to what may now be pretty permanent working from home. For people who live in that area, that's going to be really loud all day. And so that's something to keep in mind. How do we support residents to be able to get through that with their brains and their professional lives intact as well? So that's another element of EDIC's mission. Who else was talking when I was interrupting? Cassie.
I think it might have been me. I'm not sure. Just a thought, sponsor an internship for a kid at Easthampton High to do the videos. Just a thought. Maybe that could be some free labor. And I'm not sure if this is the right time or place to suggest this, but what if we did coupon books for the businesses on Union Street to encourage folks to go in there and keep using those businesses? Just a thought.
Yeah, I have no idea. Maybe Mo, I don't know how that would work, but I think we're going to need to come up with some strategies for sure. So I think many things go on the table, and then figure out what will help them the most. Yeah, I think Gwen, if it's okay, I think putting it on the agenda for the next meeting, and March, it's going to be questionable so let's say it's March 15th. We may not even be out to bid yet. So we may not have much yet, but I think starting to formulate some strategies, I think would be great.
Great. Chris Korchak.
I know some hurry and scurry stuff has been going through planning. What is the schedule for that like? Is that going to be at the same time?
It's been tricky to understand their schedule. They just got permits. The permits have a valid period of time. I need to double check. We have not really heard from them. We did coordinate. We made sure that the hurry scurry engineer talked to the city engineer about the Union Street project. So like, it was even kind of basic stuff like, okay, their sidewalk is going to go here and the city sidewalk is going to go here. Let's make sure that we have the same plan. But I will try to dig out. I'll try to dig around a little bit for the next meeting. I think what we all know, but like the cost of construction is not good right now. It's too high. So I don't know if that's a factor for them. I don't have a lot of dialogue with the owner at this point, but I could certainly dig around. I know that as a real quick sidebar in terms of cultural chaos, my understanding, and I'm going to be at the ECA meeting, they switched their day, so now they're at 5:00 tonight. They are, from what I understand, they are planning to do cultural chaos this year. which is good. I have heard rumblings about a name change of the event, which is something that ECA will talk about tonight, I think. But the question that I got asked was about the Jim's package store project. And I do think that one, last I asked, that one will likely break ground in the next couple months. They are moving the package store into the building that's now green in the back. And what I was told is as soon as they can get the package store in there, they're going to put up the perimeter fence and start going at that project. So by like June, that project will be under construction in the middle of cultural chaos, but you know, it'll be fenced off and it shouldn't really impact that event in particular, but
Gotta get mean to the word chaos.
yeah.
Very
I think
good.
that's all I got at this point.
Okay. I will get back to this LRRP thing in a second, but we had talked in December, maybe January, about the fact that I'm aware that the Board of Public Works is talking about addressing water and sewer rates in the city to change them, make them more equitable, make them more responsive to user needs and actual use. And I went to their meeting in January, and they're very formal. You can go to public speak, but they won't talk back to you. You will only be listened to. So I had them listen to me. Said, hi, I'm nice and you should like us and come talk to us about whether we can work together on this. We sent 3 emails, both before and after that meeting, and have heard zip, not a zilch. So Jeff Bagg, I don't know if there's another way to, I mean, I don't want to look thirsty. If they don't want our help, they don't want our help. But I'm interested in thinking about how EDIC could support that kind of public fact-finding / information-giving work that they appear to be trying to do. But doesn't seem like they're that interested. I don't know. If you have any thoughts on that, I'd welcome them, but maybe you don't.
I don't have any thoughts off the cuff. So let me consider that. Let me think about that. And maybe we can talk either offline or at the next meeting. I don't think anything's going to happen immediately. I think the last time they held the meeting to talk about rates, it was a pretty big meeting. So there should, in theory, there should be a little bit of lead time, but I guess even I'm saying that I don't want to hold anyone to that. Anything is possible. They could pop it up at their next meeting, but I think getting a little bit of support is nice. I think that's a nice offer. So I think eventually, I would imagine that eventually someone will get back to you and figure out how to incorporate. Sometimes it's hard. People want to help and it's hard to incorporate how best to get help. So
Sure.
Maybe that's the case.
Okay, I'll just be more patient then. Tom Brown. You're muted, sir.
September's coming quickly, and the downtown elementary schools will be vacant September 1st. How is the reuse committee or whatever committee's involved with that whole downtown plan? How is that proceeding with looking at those school buildings?
Yeah, that's a big one, but yes, it is proceeding well. The elementary school reuse committee has met probably 5 times. I have built a web page, so if anyone's inclined, under the planning department is current projects, and elementary school reuse is there, and so every document that's been prepared so far is posted there, and then the meeting recordings are posted there as well. But the long and short is that it's been a lot of getting up to speed, a lot of education about the general process, starting to patch together the information towards what will become a draft request for proposals. So the group has talked a lot about elements of the RFP that will be important in terms of, are there going to be things that will be absolutely required, or things that would be ranked as eligibility criteria, things that would be desirable. And actually I was thinking of Chris, maybe I hand this over to Chris in a second too, because Chris is on that committee. The general goal is hopefully to put out the RFP in maybe June is our current target. And we are going to need to start going through some of the committee process. So the city council and the school committee, actually the school committee would be first, then it'll go to city council, and we're targeting kind of some of those discussions to start in May. So I think a formal update, should be available sometime soon once we kind of finally mapped out the entire process or the timeline. Chris, do you want to, Gwen, is it okay that Chris can give it to your own perspective on it, Chris, and where you think we're at and how to describe that?
Sure. So like you said, I don't have much to add, but we met probably five times. And we've been figuring out our priorities, like Jeff said, and working how best to have the RFP proposal requests ready. We have some questions about whether or not to keep existing infrastructure, in other words, tear down buildings or not. I think basically the consultant's doing a good job of walking us through the process, and they're going to be actually writing the proposal based on our input, which is largely based on the city meetings that we had. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. Nothing's coming to the top of my head that Jeff hasn't said.
Thanks, Chris. I think one thing that you did say is that one of the mantras coming out of this is that making sure the RFP is flexible. It has been a really consistent theme, is that we, as a community, we want to be careful not to dictate something that is going to be hard, that's going to be like impossible, that we would turn away people by requiring something that's really difficult. But there has been a lot of discussion about so each property has its own kind of unique assets. So the gymnasium at Pepin has come up as something that, the way it's been discussed is that it would be highly desirable if that could be preserved. But right now it's not sure that we want to require it to be preserved, because that could be hard to meet. But we're on this sliding scale of having these discussions. And I think the last point I want to make, and because it came up at the last meeting, is that the reuse committee is really trying to gather, synthesize, and put together a draft that will go to city council, and city council will review that and make the decisions. But we just try, the group's goal is to do all that legwork and put it in a format that can be reviewable and kind of work for the city council to review. We are going to be working with Mass Development. They're coming to work with Easthampton to do some survey of the properties, because right now we don't know where the property lines are. We don't have a map that plots the buildings on it. And we're going to do some evaluation of the infrastructure in the neighborhood. So, like the water and sewer conditions are unknown. And we will have a consultant who will investigate that to find out if there's areas that are deficient, so that we all know that certain things might need to be upgraded in the future. And I think maybe for the March meeting, I think that that would be a good thing to kind of have on the agenda, and we can work together. I think Chris and I could work together to give a more formal update, on behalf of the group, if that's okay.
Yeah, and just to put a finer point on it, the reason we have that general mantra is because we want as many creative answers to our RFP as possible, so we don't end up with one or two things that we kind of have to take because there's no other alternative. I think there's the prevailing thought is that we've done this a few times as a city in the past with sometimes undesirable results, and we are very much not making those same mistakes.
That's great. All right. Any further pressing we want to do of Jeff Bagg, city planner?
I just have a question, just from my curiosity. Once the RFP goes out, what's typical for a time frame to give organizations a chance to respond or put in a proposal?
A great question, Paul. I think I'm going to go off my recollection, but I think we talked about 6 weeks. I think was my recollection was that I think in that period of time, We also would organize an opportunity for interested parties to do a site visit. So, it could be longer, but it depends on when we get it out. We've pushed back the hope for releasing it to probably like June. But even that, everyone that we've talked to is that has given credit to the city for being proactive. Is that, even though the students will walk out the door in June, having the RFP out in June would also be really beneficial, I think. The other thing of flexibility, the goal was to try to keep those vacant as short as possible. And this also did come up at the meeting, and it's something that we're going to, two things, sorry. We are really going to try to utilize a frequently asked questions document as a way to help educate people about what we've talked about and where we're going to go. Just as it seems like the best way to help people understand the questions that have already been asked and the answers. But one thing that we talked about is we do want to make sure everyone understands that releasing the RFP in June, for example, and even, or maybe it's 2 months, or more, even if we're getting responses in September, nothing's going to be happening. It's not like this immediate thing where a developer's just in the building renovating it. They have to then, investigate the building. They do all kinds of due diligence. They have to go through permitting with the planning board and other bodies, and they have to build their financial package all before they put a shovel in the ground. So even from like September, it would probably be a whole nother year before there's like an actual shovel in the ground. And we do want to make sure people are aware of that this isn't like the RFP comes in September and all of a sudden work's happening. It's really going to be a longer process, but we're taking every step we can to be fast.
Just one other thought came to mind too, while we're talking about the schools. You may all be aware that the massage school, former Memorial Hall, is currently for sale. And that, I think, I'm not 100% sure, I've talked about it with Jeff a little bit, I think the requirement to keep the building goes away with subsequent sales, meaning someone could potentially remove the building and use that entire parcel is huge. And just as an FYI, obviously that could also have a big potential economic impact on downtown with what might go there. Not going to happen real soon because it's kind of a ridiculous sale price right now. But again, I think the key is that a subsequent owner would not be required, I think, to maintain the building.
So could someone who's
The auto shop next door, does that property include the auto shop next door?
It does not. It does not. It goes from Lyman Street around Pleasant. But if you ever look behind that building, there's quite a bit of land behind that building to the next property.
Okay.
So could someone just create like a shell company, buy it, and then sell it to essentially themselves just to get around that? Or is there a time limiting factor, or what's the deal with that?
I think what I was saying, Paul, is that when it was originally sold X number of years ago, there was a requirement, a restriction that the building had to stay. The building couldn't go. But I believe that restriction goes away with the next sale. So if you went and bought it, you could remove the building if you wanted to.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
Anything else that's come to your mind in this conversation, or I'm going to move us along to another thing. Okay. Paul and I think, had similar thoughts about the bottom of page 15 of the local rapid recovery plan report thing that I sent you back in, I don't know when, look in your email. There is this section that is, its header says, the city has no downtown organization overseeing recovery efforts, and leads with the idea that the city lacks institutional infrastructure and capacity to manage the implementation of inclusive recovery and growth strategies. So I looked at that and went, does this have any bearing on what EDIC could do or support? And I'm interested, Paul, I'm certainly interested to hear if you had a more substantive response to that than just questions. And if anybody else, I'm happy to send the PDF to you again if you just don't have that readily accessible. If we want to postpone that to another meeting, but.
Well, I mean, I would only say that it reminds me of Blueprint Easthampton as being an organization that may be interested or a part of that. And also, I mean, it certainly was an interesting blurb or a part of that report to, for them to note that. And I think that we've talked in the past about feeling like we have had some limited capacity in economic development municipally. I think that the planning department is expanding. I think they're trying to add staff, and that's a good thing. But I'm curious to know, Jeff, what your thoughts were upon seeing that in the report, or what the city is looking at to do there.
I wanted to defer to Mo first, and then maybe I can latch on to the end. I'm curious Mo's response to that.
Well, I just was, because I was looking for the report when you were reading that, Gwen. So which paragraph did you just read out loud?
I read from the bottom of page 15. There are two main sections. So I read the first sentence of the second section.
Public administrators, that one?
No.
One in the middle? Well, public administrators have demonstrated commitments to serving all residents. Is that the one? On page 15?
Oh, I'm reading that whole section. It's 3 paragraphs. So I started with the first paragraph of that.
Okay. I was just trying to catch up. Sorry.
Understood. I mean, it gets into the idea, exactly as you say, Paul, of Blueprint Easthampton. It's talking about entrepreneur support organizations. It's talking about the local chamber. It's talking about district. I don't know what a district organization is, but staff roles within the city dedicated to business and economic development. I mean, I think we looked kind of enviously at Arlington when our friend came and talked to us, and we went, "Oh my gosh, you're a city employee who does economic development? That's so cool." So thoughtful.
Well, I guess I would say, there's this ever-growing team effort, even though there isn't one particular person within City Hall that is labeled as economic development. But city planning has definitely been a huge part of that. The chamber has been a part of that, and that partnership has grown, and it will continue to grow with many of these LRRP projects. One of them being the Work Hub on Union, the co-work space, and things that will be born of that and because of that. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but Jeff?
Sure. I want to add, because I think I'm not, that doesn't surprise me. Obviously, Mo and I were part of that plan. It got drafted at the end without a lot of our input at the end. So we didn't get to add or make amendments. But I think we talked a lot about it during this process, which is capacity on all fronts is an issue. And I think it's a really common thing that, we all have to keep in mind that every project needs a person. And the bigger the project is, the more time of that person to kind of make it happen. And, I think even it became overwhelming in that LRP process, because at some point we had 23 projects, and we whittled it down to some number. I don't know if there's 10 or 11 in there, but, to accomplish all those projects, we collectively, between the chamber and the city, we don't have the capacity. We would never be able to do all those at once. So it's really kind of prioritizing and selecting the ones that make the most sense at the right time. So the two things I was going to latch onto are, even in the 2008 master plan, there is a action item to create an economic development position, whether it's a director or a planner or someone or anywhere. We've never done that. So since 2008, that's been identified. And the planning department, I appreciate what Paul said, is I think we kind of have a framework to handle just about the things we are doing now, but to have that designated, because I am stretched pretty thin. So to have that designated voice to work on economic development projects Like that is a kind of a missing piece in town hall. And I've been trying. The mayor and I have been balancing the role of economic development, and it's not going to be enough to really sustain us in the future. So I think there's capacity at that level. Working with the chamber, I think the chamber, is pretty good right now, but the way that Mo has talked about, I think, is changing the nature of the chamber to the type of things that they do, less events and more support for businesses and the things that can be done that way. And so that might take more people power. And then like we have the cultural district, which has a subcommittee, but if you look at Union Street, Main Street, the Mills, we don't really have we don't have a district representation. That is something that we talked about, like Union Street doesn't have an association, so to speak. So there are these things that I think I identified as gaps. And I think it sounds like something that the EDIC should be talking about, and ways to kind of set a midterm goal a couple years from now to figure out how to fill that gap in any way possible. I think we want to keep in mind that we put that in the plan, because if there's ever a funding opportunity that could fund a position, then we'll have said, oh, we need help. We need that capacity. So I'm not surprised that it's in there. I think it would be a great thing to start to talk about. I think there's like a gradated scale, where EDIC could fit in, where additional staff could fit in, and where like what Mo and I have been talking about is just continuing to grow the partnership between the city and the chamber. And there's a certain force that we can do by doing that, but we kind of need it all to really kind of lift up all the economic development stuff that everyone wants to do.
I do want to say, Jeff, that I realize that you don't have a ton of resources and you're only just one person, but you do a fantastic job. And, I think we all feel that way about the city, has made really good strides, and you do a lot with a little, and I think we all appreciate that.
Here, here.
Thanks. No, I appreciate that. And I it's hard. We've in the past 3 years I've been here, it's been nothing but budget cuts. And this year it's like this tiny little modest, we get this up to 3%, that's the maximum. So we were told we need a budget that changes 1%, 2%, and 3%. And we need to run all three scenarios. And I'll just say that at 3%, even at the planning department, like that, it would never equal a person. So, we're not at this point where adding another, I was successful in adding a planner position 2 years ago, but that was to cover all the planning board, land use stuff, and that is a really important role. But, I don't want to be greedy either. Like the planning department, it has to be modest increases in staff. So an economic development person, is still a couple of years out. If we can kind of stay the course and build the momentum and show the need for it, it's not immediate. It's still a couple of years, but it is important in my opinion.
Tom?
Jeff, I don't think it's being greedy at all. I think if you look around us, most municipalities have a separate economic development position. I know the person in Holyoke, there's one in Northampton, I believe. And when I read that section, Gwen, I took that to mean a municipal person, if you will, or a municipal department that would oversee that, rather than a volunteer group, if you will. And maybe what EDIC does for that is begins to find a way to advocate for an economic development director. Maybe we just constantly bark up the tree, so the next time there's a position to be added, and I'm not saying one department pits against another, but if the mayor's considering adding a police officer, or a fireman, or economic development, maybe if we're the squeaky wheel, we get the economic development person.
Yeah, and I think there's a trick there, which is we're doing a lot, and we have to maintain what we're doing, but here's all the things we're not doing.
Right.
And having it's kind of one of those sad realities where you have to really say, we're not able to do that, and we can't do all these other things to support economic development until or if we get a person or a department would be grand. Because I think a person and two people, I think that would just elevate Easthampton and continue kind of to evolve it. But I think it's it's a big lift. I would appreciate, I think that, Tom, I think the continued repetition of like the importance of having more, a person kind of designated for that purpose would be really key.
Yeah, that was one of my takeaways as well. I mean, that section, which is really short, closes out by saying, because things are tough and we don't have this central city hall located person, collaborative partnerships are mission critical. Yes, and wouldn't it be interesting if we could get ourselves to that point through collaborative partnerships that are seeing success and be able to point to the fact that other local municipalities have a person who can spend time dedicating their brain to some of this thinking? Could be, it could change things a little bit.
It's going to be a point.
That's a cool idea.
There's going to be a point also, you know, when all of these projects that we're working on and all of this, you know, the LLRP, and as we check the list off of these lists, check the list and the items on that list, there's going to come a point where, you know, we're working as a partnership and a collaboratively, and it's really tight and it's chugging along. But like we're talking about, that person and that department will be necessary, because in order to grow from there, we would need that.
And
I like the idea of thinking about how we might strategically, regularly advocate for an economic development role at City Hall. I think that's a cool idea. Listen, y'all, it's 4:57 p.m. Barring further discussion on this topic, I have this strong belief that we should just end the meeting.
I second that motion.
Anybody else?
sounds like a plan.
Yeah, anything else
Motion
to
to
say?
adjourn.
We got a second there from Mo? Okay.
Second. Third.
Any further discussion about adjournment or anything else on that agenda?
No.
Okay, great. All in favor of adjourning this meeting until March 15th, holler aye.
Aye.
Yay!
Thanks,
Have a
Jeff.
wonderful month. I'll see you out there.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.